Welcome back to our series on your church and Bitcoin. It's no mystery that Bitcoin isn't the only cryptocurrency. So what should you think about all these alternatives, or altcoins, and why is Bitcoin any different, better, or less scammy? In a previous video, we already discussed why Bitcoin is not a scam and why so many altcoins are actually Ponzi schemes. And this fact has become even more painfully obvious with the recent release of many so-called meme coins that don't even try to claim that they have any utility. Sadly, many celebrities and politicians have effectively stolen money from their devoted followers and speculators alike by cashing in on this trend. And all this noise has further muddied the waters and engendered distrust in the entire idea of cryptocurrency in the first place, Bitcoin included. Having said that, this video will focus more on the technical arguments against traditional altcoins, most of which do usually claim to have some utility. You see, many promoters of altcoins will tell you that Bitcoin is outdated from a technical perspective. As the first widely adopted cryptocurrency, it's a great V1, but Satoshi could not have possibly gotten it perfect on the first try, and so there needs to be continued innovation in the form of altcoins. This viewpoint comes from a flawed understanding of the history of Bitcoin, which really stretches all the way back to the 1970s when public key cryptography was first invented. From there, decades of research and innovation played out, resulting in projects such as DigiCash and Hashcash in the 80s and 90s, both of which can be viewed as early predecessors of Bitcoin. In this context, Satoshi was actually standing on the shoulders of giants when he launched Bitcoin after nearly 40 years of research in the space by legends such as Whitfield Diffie and Martin Hellman, and cypherpunks like Adam Back. Bitcoin could have proved to be just another project in a long line of failures, and at the time, there was really no way to tell that it was special. But from an altcoin promoter that's aware of the history, you may encounter a more sophisticated argument. For example, you may hear that Bitcoin's proof-of-work protocol is unnecessary and wasteful compared to proof-of-stake, or that Bitcoin's too slow, or that Bitcoin doesn't provide some key feature like anonymity. In all these cases, the solution offered is the same. You should buy some altcoin instead of Bitcoin because it's better and represents a bigger investment opportunity. We've already discussed at length why Bitcoin shouldn't be viewed as an investment, so for now let's just focus on the technical claims of these arguments. With regard to proof-of-work, we covered how it isn't a waste of energy in the Is Bitcoin Evil video, so why do people feel the need to offer proof of stake as a solution to something that isn't really a problem? Well, first, let's define what it is. Proof of stake is a consensus mechanism used by altcoins, such as Ethereum, where users validate new transactions by staking a certain amount of cryptocurrency for the right to do so. The more you stake, the more authority you get in choosing which transactions make it into new blocks. And this eliminates the need to run costly hashing functions such as SHA-256 in Bitcoin's protocol. And this helps solve the problem of scaling the network to millions of transactions per day, or even more. On the surface, this seems great, but unfortunately it leads to centralization of power into the hands of a few who already own the most coins, or in other words, the wealthy elite. The proof-of-stake consensus mechanism is essentially a recreation of the power structure found in the traditional finance system, where the largest holders of fiat balances and assets wield the most political power. And unlike proof-of-stake, proof-of-work anchors Bitcoin to reality because real-world energy use is unforgeable from a physics standpoint. And this is the only decentralized way to prove that something actually happened before something else in a digital system. If you're interested in more about why this matters and how Bitcoin should really be thought of as a time chain instead of a blockchain, watch Jack Maller's excellent presentation from Bitcoin Atlantis 2024. This one has a bit of language, so use discretion with where you watch it. If you prefer the same content in article form, read Bitcoin is Time by Gigi. The summary is that in order to prove that someone can spend money, we need to be sure that they haven't already spent it, and this is known as the double spend problem in monetary theory. Proof of stake solves this problem by placing the power to decide the order of transactions in the hands of a few, and this makes it vulnerable to centralization, corruption, and censorship. And so we start to see a general principle that is described by what blockchain researchers call the blockchain trilemma. The blockchain trilemma refers to the challenge of achieving three critical aspects of blockchain technology: security, scalability, and decentralization. The trilemma suggests that optimizing one aspect often compromises the others, making it difficult to achieve all three simultaneously. In the case of proof of stake, the idea is to optimize the scalability, but it comes at the expense of decentralization. As many altcoins come and go, it becomes increasingly obvious that Satoshi was well aware of these trade-offs, and that he carefully architected Bitcoin and chose the consensus parameters to strike a balance between these aspects of the problem. But is Bitcoin really too slow to become a medium of exchange? Bitcoin skeptics and altcoin promoters like to agree on this point. For example, you might hear something like, "I can't buy coffee with Bitcoin like I can with a credit card," or even if I could, the transaction would be too slow and too expensive. So should Bitcoin be compared to something like a credit card? On the surface, this comparison is understandable because credit cards kind of feel like digital money, and that is what Bitcoin claims to be after all. And credit card networks like Visa and MasterCard are accepted everywhere and can process tens of thousands of transactions per second. Bitcoin, on the other hand, is accepted by very few merchants, and at best can only process about 7 transactions per second. And even then, transactions can take over 30 minutes to settle. By all accounts, Bitcoin is worse as a medium of exchange compared to credit cards. So how can Bitcoin take over as money? This is actually a fairly easy objection to address because comparing Bitcoin to credit cards is actually apples to oranges. A more appropriate analogy would be looking at Bitcoin compared to the Federal Reserve wire network, which is commonly known as FedWire. Anytime you send a wire transfer at your bank, you're actually using the FedWire system. And as you've probably been warned, you can't reverse wire transfers. They're considered final settlement. In other words, sending Bitcoin is more akin to sending a wire transfer in that both technologies offer final settlement. And this is not typically a feature of high-volume payment rails such as credit cards. For more details on the difference between the two, read Chapter 9 and Gradually Then Suddenly by Parker Lewis. So if you take a deeper look at the traditional financial system, or TradFi for short, credit cards actually operate at a higher level or layer in the system, and they rely on underlying layers like FedWire to function. The reality is, when you make a credit card transaction, the merchant doesn't immediately receive the funds or even have final settlement for weeks or months after the transaction. The banks actually batch the transactions and settle the net balances over FedWire, which ironically also has a peak capacity of about 7 transactions per second. If you've ever paid to send a wire transfer, you know that FedWire can take several days and cost something like $30. This is actually slow and expensive compared to Bitcoin, which currently offers final settlement in about 30 minutes for just a few bucks. And just like TradFi, Bitcoin has an active community of businesses and developers that are committed to creating functionality at higher layers, like the Lightning Network, which is sometimes referred as a Layer 2 solution because it sits on top of the Bitcoin network. Lightning payments are a closer analog to credit card transactions, and because the Lightning Network is decentralized, the network actually has no theoretical maximum throughput, unlike the centralized servers that Visa and MasterCard operate. Granted, Lightning payments are not ubiquitously accepted by merchants yet either, but neither were credit cards in the early days of the technology. It took decades to deploy point-of-sale systems that could accept credit card payments, and it's unfair to hold Bitcoin payments to a different standard, though wide-scale acceptance will likely be faster due to the digital nature of our modern economy. If you're interested in more details about the history of money and what people have used as a medium of exchange in the past, read Chapter 2 in Broken Money by Lynn Alden and Chapter 2 in the Bitcoin Standard by Saifedean Ammous. So to summarize, financial systems operate in layers, and the idea that Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency can or should be able to solve all the use cases of money in a single layer is not practical, as it inevitably leads to unacceptable compromises. The TradFi system is a working example of a layer-based approach, and there's nothing wrong with this type of solution. That isn't to say that Bitcoin is perfect and will never need changes, but the ossification over time is a feature, not a bug, as it results in confidence that certain aspects of the protocol, such as the supply cap, will be the same today as they are tomorrow and even in 100 years. Altcoins that promote true anonymity, like Monero, can't make this claim, and as such, they're unsuitable as money because they aren't provably scarce, and the same type of argument can be made for any other so-called enhancement by altcoins. For more details on why Bitcoin is unique, check out Michael Saylor's talk called Bitcoin, There Is No Second Best, and watch Bitcoin University's video called Caspa, the Next Bitcoin. For more details on proof of work versus proof of stake, read Chapter 24 in Broken Money. In the end, Bitcoin is the next Bitcoin, and there is no second best.